I want to talk about building a brand in 2025. It's something I've touched on a little bit before, but I think I don't know when, but probably a few weeks ago, it just really came to me as what I should be focusing on in 2025. Like, there's a lot of things you're thinking about, like, what should I be focusing on? What should I be working on? Like, what's important? All of those things. And there's lots of things you can think about, not just in your business, but of course in your life as well. And I think this is actually a really cool thought for like the whole of your life, this idea of building a brand. So let me just clarify what I mean by the word brand. I'm not talking about a visual identity in terms of a logo or some fonts or some colors. That's cool, and we need that as well. But I'm talking about building a reputation, because that's what a brand is. A brand is a reputation. A brand is not what you say about you. A brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So if you think of a person, who's the first person who comes to mind? Don't tell me. Just think of that person and think about what you think about in relationship to that person. So it could be negative or positive. Think about a celebrity, first celebrity that comes to mind, and now think about, what comes to mind. Might be positive or negative. We could go on. You could do the same with businesses. You could do the same with church. You can do the same with etc. So this is kind of what the brand is. The brand is not what you say it is. The brand is what other people think about, what association they have. And the idea around branding or building a brand is actually you can be deliberate about curating that reputation. Now, ultimately, reputation comes from, are you actually a good person who's doing good work? Like, ultimately, that's what matters, right? But kind of on top of that, I think it's like our approach to life and our approach to business. So it's not just what we're doing, it's the way that we're doing it that carries what I would say is the spirit of Christ, like the aroma of Christ, like it talks about. So there's kind of like a smell, there's kind of a feel, there's kind of it's intangible sometimes. Sometimes you see certain people like pop up on social media and you just kind of get a bad vibe and you can't really explain why. Sometimes certain preachers, you just, I'm not, there's just something there. Who knows what it is, but whatever it is, it's by definition part of their brand, part of their reputation. And so I found, when we focus too much on like results, so if we think about like, okay, we're coming to the end of 2024, we're taking stock of like how things been, like what have we accomplished, like are we happy, etc. We talked about that last week. How much of what we set out to do this year have we actually done? So now think 12 months time. It's December 2025 and we're closing up the garden and we're going, well, what's everyone doing for Christmas? And it's a 4 years time. Like, what do you want? How do you want to be feeling when you get there? And so what I want for me and what I want to encourage you to think about is getting to a place where I think, you know what, I wasn't in control of everything that happened this year, but I actually sowed a lot of seed. I put seed in the ground, seed in terms of like building structures in the business, creating content, being deliberate about who I'm working with, who I'm collaborating with, what projects that I started that represent who I am and what I really want to do. Because I found in life that most of success is kind of like you're not in control of. It's kind of the fruit that comes. So if I think back to like cool people I've been able to work with or different projects, pretty much always they've come about kind of by serendipity. We could also say by the Holy Spirit. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of time and chance. And if you think for a moment, for those of you who are already building something, or just moments where things have opened up that are just like complete chance, like you weren't really, you didn't really create that opportunity. You just happened to be available, and you went to one event and you connected with a different person. And so like big life decisions and life moments are like hugely about chance. Like if I hadn't gone to, Sheffield for university, I wouldn't be married to my wife and have my children. Unless somehow there was another opportunity. So this really small decision, it's a big decision, but it's also a small decision in a way. Like I could have gone lots of places. Like I had multiple offers and I could have gone to different parts of the country, but I went there. And so huge things open up. And so that decision, obviously, huge, loads of ripple effects of kind of things. And so I found like often like getting to work with certain people is kind of a lot of like chance. So you're not in control of chance, obviously. God is. But what we can do is we can make sure that when the chances come, we are positioned well. So we're doing the work behind the scenes to create and build what we want to create so that when God brings an opportunity, it's like, okay, cool, I'm actually ready for it. So I think this is a really nice approach for me because it takes me away from trying to chase after things I can't control. Because there's so many things in life I can't control about what's going to happen, but there's so many things I can control. And it's kind of just saying, let me focus on the things that I can control. Ultimately, I can't control what other people think about me, right? But I can put seed in the ground to create, a reputation around what do I do and who am I? So that when people think of Sats, what do they think of? I want people, when they think of Sats, to think of someone who's creative. I want them to think of someone who genuinely loves God and loves people, who's here to serve, who's a fresh thinker. Like, there's all these different things. I think I want to be known for that. And I'm not chasing those things, but I'm being deliberate about thinking, what am I building and how can I build that in 2025? And I believe for each of us here today, if we focus on building something very specific, we're going to find that opportunities will come. And we want opportunities to come. And it could be that God is already bringing opportunities to us that we are just missing because we're not actually ready for them. There could be conversations that we're already having, but because we haven't done like the nitty gritty every day, we're not actually in a place to actually go, okay, let's go. So what we want to do is just continue to be faithful with what we're supposed to do, and God will bring about the increase. So it's kind of nice as well because it takes the pressure off. And so here's my kind of conviction around this whole process of building a brand, is that the best way to do it is slowly. This is a theme that comes again and again and again. I listened to a podcast episode with Pete Scazzero, who some of you guys might know, does some bunch of stuff around emotional health for churches. And, he shares this whole thing about the parable of the mustard seed. And he says the mustard seed is basically like the opposite of what we all want. The mustard seed is small. Apparently, it takes like 700 mustard seeds to weigh out a gram. So it's like really small. And Jesus says this is the parable, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man, planted in the ground, and then it grows. So it starts really small, but we are really uncomfortable with small. And I find all the things that build your brand tend to be the small things, tend to be the things no one's noticing, tends to be just like showing up, but we're uncomfortable with that. So we're trying to accelerate the process to get to a place of bigness. The second one is that it's, what is it? Can't remember off the top of my head, but the third one is he talks about how it's weak, it's weakness, and you see this all the way through Scripture as well. Obviously, Jesus comes in weakness, and it's like we are not comfortable with things being weak, so we're not comfortable with our business being small. So we've got to project here, and so basically, this whole like need for us to go faster than we should be going is the thing that basically like catches us out. It even means that we're focusing totally on the wrong things, doing the wrong work, or we're kind of maybe building the right things, but we're going about it in the wrong way. So I've already talked about look, and I want to just, if you think about people who build something great, you've kind of got a few categories. And what we tend to see is the extreme examples. So the extreme examples are kind of like extreme talent. You guys are all very talented. But as far as I'm concerned, when I look at myself, I do have talents, but I'm not extreme talent, right? So there's certain, I don't know if you guys follow Zach King on Instagram. He just creates all these like magic illusion type things. And I've been following him for years, and he is extremely talented. It's just insane. Like I can't do stuff like that. It's just way, way beyond. So I think there is like a case for when people are extremely talented, they are obviously accelerated in their process of how fast they can build something. But it's also true that a lot of people who are extremely talented also have to go quite slowly and don't get noticed for ages because there is a lot of talent out there. So that's great. If that's you, amazing. You're already, you don't need to be here. But probably for the rest of us, we're just kind of like mid to high level talent. Like we're good. We got stuff we can contribute, but it's not like, So they're either extremely talented or they're extremely lucky, right? And we know luck comes to us all, time and chance. It's part of the picture. Some people do get lucky and they get discovered, they get noticed, they get a brand deal with so-and-so, and there's just a serendipity that accelerates the process. Again, this is a really small minority of people. They're the people we tend to think of because they're the people everybody knows. And because they've accelerated and because, again, we celebrate the wrong thing. We celebrate speed instead of celebrating, slowness. Oh, that was the other one. So it's the kingdom of heaven. The mustard seed is small, is also slow, and then it's weak. So because we don't celebrate slow, we only see the examples of people who have accelerated quickly. So who are the people who come and speak at churches or come and speak at business events? They're the people who have grown a business in 12 months. It's now this, right? So we're celebrating all those things. So we're only seeing the extreme examples, and cool, more, let's celebrate that. Amazing. But most businesses and most people are not supposed to move that fast. We're actually supposed to move much slower. And the other way that you can accelerate in a way that's not good is by living outside of health. So there's a lot of people who make a lot of money in this world, but you don't want their life. You just don't want their life, So there's often a lot of thing about the top 1% CEOs, and it's, look at this inequality, and fair enough. But let me just say this: you don't want their life. I do not aspire to be those people, and you shouldn't either. So forget about it, So it's living with that incessant pressure. You have no free time. You have to take your laptop everywhere you go. You have to respond. You have to be available, and you are at the mercy of the market. When things are well, your mental health is great. When things are not, you're just crazy. You have to medicate often to numb the pain of it all, because you're so focused and so intense. So again, we look at all these people and we admire, we go, wow, how cool would it be for me to be like that? But I'm telling you, you don't want that sort of meteoric rise or meteoric pressure, because people are using all sorts of coping mechanisms that are super unhealthy. There's a reason drug culture is just so massive in the celebrity world. And it's just, you got to take drugs to keep this thing going. Then you need to take drugs to calm yourself down. And it's just crazy. So obviously, we all get that concept. But I think it's just worth saying, just to remind you, don't be tempted by living unhealthy. For some of us, it's just breaking the Sabbath. It's just pushing that little bit harder. It's just sacrificing the wrong things. And it's just in the long haul, you're gonna miss out. And we see it, don't we? I know cancel culture is a thing, but we also just see people who have compromised, to get to where they are, and and in their integrity, it ultimately destroys them. So it's they're successful for 40 years and then they're not. And it's who wants that? What is the point spending all this time building all this stuff if it's all worth nothing? So the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It's slow. And I think building a great business that is part of the kingdom of God, the best way you can do it is slowly. Now, if my business takes off quickly, maybe I'll change my teaching for the garden next year. But it's not we're complaining if there's eyes on what you're doing. That's amazing, so we celebrate that. But I think this is the exception, not the norm. And I think in your business, there are moments and seasons where there is acceleration, but most of it is really bog standard. and I think the more we're comfortable with that, the more we're going to be comfortable with doing the work. Because what happens is we tell ourselves, well, we're doing something wrong because everybody else is blowing up. But actually, you might be doing it right. And who knows if they're doing it right or wrong? It's not up to us to judge. It's just that, hey, let me focus on being faithful with what I'm supposed to do. So there's this really interesting dynamic, and I shared before in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow, just worry about today. And there's this really interesting idea because he says, tomorrow will worry about itself. Don't be anxious, focus on today, basically. So we're cool. Don't think about tomorrow. But then at the same time, baked into scriptures is this concept of eternity. So it's kind of an interesting tension, I think. We have today, and we have a viewpoint of eternity. So we are two things at the same time need to take place. We need to be super present in what we're doing. And that, for me, is the definition of a healthy person, a mature person. We're able to sit with emotions. We're able to sit with disappointment. We're able to sit in our success. We're able to sit wherever we are and be content and be fully present. If you think of a person who is loving, they are a person who are fully present. They're available. They're there. When you're talking to them, they're not glancing over. Who else am I going to talk to next? They're there with you. So being present seems, and when you look at Jesus, he was very, very present in his, in everything he was doing. So it seems to me that being present in today, in the present moment, is like a really good thing to do. It also seems to me that we should have a viewpoint around eternity. So there's a bit of a tension here. We're thinking about the long term. We're thinking about what we're building for the long term. And that's why I want you to think about slow, because then you're not just going to even be thinking about the next 12 months. You're going to think about the next 10 years. And, there's this crazy thing where basically people sacrifice their health early on to try and maximize, but they just live less. That's literally what happens. Like all the stress and all that, they just cut short years at the end. So they're not gaining anything. They're just rearranging how life works. So when you understand that, hey, we're actually going to live forever, it kind of, I don't know, like it just gives you a different spirit. It's like, cool, I want to be faithful in today, but I'm also going to live forever. So here's a good question for us. What are we going to do in heaven? Is there going to be business in heaven? I think there will be. I think there's going to be things to do. I think we'll be able to write music. I think if heaven is like the fulfillment of like every, of God's goodness, God's not going to get rid of lots of cool stuff. Now, it's going to change. We know it's going to change. We often think of heaven as being sort of fluffy and floaty, but actually it's the opposite. This is fluffy and floaty, and heaven is more tangible, is more real. And 1 Corinthians 3, verse 13 talks about how, at the end, all of our work will be tested with fire. And whatever remains will be like, cool, good job. So whatever we've been building with, if we're building with wood or hay, it's going to get burnt up. It's going to count for nothing, like literally for nothing. A lot of people are building like that. We don't want to be those people, but you can build with gold, silver, all this kind of stuff. It's the way we approach life. And I think it's interesting because when we think about heaven and there's a new heaven and there's new earth, there's lots of like interesting theology here, but actually Jesus goes around saying the kingdom of heaven is here now. It's here now. So heaven is both a place we will go to as well as a place that is coming to earth. So I don't fully understand how it's going to work, but everything here is going to be both wiped out and remade. It's going to be reformed. It's going to be renewed. It's going to be redeemed. So who knows? I can't say for certain, but who knows how much of what we build here today will actually continue in the future. Not because we're going to need money or any of these things, but because we're just about creating cool things, right? Heaven will be a place where we'll create cool things, like no question. Heaven will be a place where we'll explore and we'll go on holiday and see new lands. And like, do you know what I mean? Like, why would it not have those ingredients when this is like the best part of like living here? So it's not just going to be a big prayer meeting. We're going to be bored. We're not designed to only do that. We are designed also to imagine. So this imagination is going to continue. And so I say all of this just to say, like, take the time pressure off what you're building, because maybe what you're building may not all be finished this side of earth. Maybe you'll keep going when you get to heaven. And that's kind of, again, just my little theory. I couldn't say definitively exactly, but I think there's some good evidence there that would actually be the case. So resist the temptation to take shortcuts and think about, what do you want to build? What do you really want to build? If you have 50 years to build something, what do you want to build? And how do you want to build it? You can become very patient, which is the fruit of the Spirit, and you can think like really deeply, and you're probably going to make the decisions required early on. It's like the whole investing conversation. Everyone's like, yeah, if you start when you're 16 and you invest this much, and by the time you get to this age, you're going to have this much money. It's like, nobody's done that, but like it's all a good idea. Like everyone tells us to do it. Yeah, I should probably do that. Hopefully someone has done that. But like, I haven't done it. I'm just getting started, like properly thinking about that sort of thing. And I think, having that long view early on is going to make sure that we build the things that we should be building. So building your reputation can never not be a good investment. So it actually doesn't matter what you go on to do, whether this is your business like forever, whether you go and get a 9 to 5, whether you change your mind, whether it's for a season, it actually doesn't matter. If you focus on building your reputation, it will benefit you across all areas. And so the best way to get a job, by the way, I got a friend who came on my podcast a while ago, and he was just talking about how he basically created a job for himself. And I know quite a few people like this. They don't apply for jobs. They just talk to people, and then it becomes apparent that there's a need, and then they and then they get signed up. And it's just a totally different way of thinking about it. If you're on Indeed, like sending hundreds and hundreds of like prospective cover letters and all this nonsense, you get rejected so much, and it's just like such a lot of faff. That high level jobs are built based on your reputation, based on your network, and you just get an invite in, and there's not even I'm sure they formally have to say they've interviewed other people, but it's like, let's create this job for you. When I think about what I'm doing, as a pastor in the church, that's a job I've created for myself. It didn't exist before we started the church. We created a job. People say, well, who should we get to? Oh, well, Sats is already doing all this work. Let's get him to. So you can create a job for yourself. So that's all based on reputation. It's all based on trust. It's all based on, all this kind of stuff that we're talking about. So I encourage you to think about, what reputation do you want to build? And what would be the actions that would build that sort of reputation? So I'll tell you some things that I want to build as my reputation, which are probably like universals. I want to be someone who's trustworthy. I want to be someone who has integrity. I want to be someone who is open-minded. I want to be someone who is always learning, right? So how can we build that sort of reputation, right? That's going to be very different depending on what you're doing. But if you can demonstrate that in everything you're doing, so rather than thinking, I got to create content to try and drive sales, instead think, I'm going to create content to build my reputation for being known for this. If you keep doing that, it is a matter of time, and you don't actually necessarily need to have loads of followers and loads of interaction. The right people will see it, and they will connect deeply to what you're doing. And I am amazed by how frequently little seeds or little connections that I made like years ago are coming back round. So my most recent, I do private coaching as well as this. My most recent coaching client doesn't follow me on Instagram, has no idea I do any of this. But anyway, just reached out completely randomly, says, I need some coaching. I think you must be the right person to do it. They didn't know that I did coaching. It was just entirely just based off like historic interaction. And so it's pretty cool to see how God can open up things based on seeds that are planted a long time ago. I'll just share one more thing, and then we'll kind of open it up and chat a little bit as well. So this is all about focusing on what you can do, not on what you can't do. I'm coming up to a milestone for me because about 2 years ago in January 2023, I started going to the gym 5 times a week. So I'm coming up to 2 years of doing that. And what's really interesting is I think I'm probably, and Rachel's a personal trainer, so she can verify, I think I'm probably only just starting to make some actual progress, which is crazy. Because I think in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, just go like a few times. You're going to see like an instant change. And that just never happened. And I was like, am I even doing the right thing? And I'm sure if I'd enlisted someone like Rachel or another personal trainer to help me and coach me and all those kind of things, I would have accelerated my progress for sure. But what I have done over the last 2 years is I've done so much learning. I've begun to learn about my body. I've begun to learn about fitness and health and blood flow. I've begun to learn about form. I've begun to learn about nutrition. I've begun to learn about how hard should I push myself? How do I rest? The relationship between my nervous system and my muscles regenerating. I've learned a lot about what are my goals? Why am I actually doing this? Like, what am I trying to do? Is it aesthetic? Is this something else? Like, what's going on? So even though after 2 years, I'm sure there has been some positive change, but it feels pretty marginal, not going to lie. And it feels like actually in the last maybe 2 months, there's been more of a change than the the time before that. I'm like, what is going on? Well, it's because I spent all this time sowing seed in my learning and building. So sometimes that process of going slowly, it may not look like much. And that's exactly what Jesus says. He says, hey, it's a small seed. And to begin with, you don't really see much happening, but then it begins to bear fruit. So if you can do the right stuff early on across the next year, maybe you won't see the fruit in 2025, but in 2027 you will. And you'll be like, I'm so glad I built that YouTube channel. I'm so glad I built that podcast, because it's your reputation, it's your brand, right? It's one of the reasons I'm doing my podcast right now as a focus, is because I realize like this is like a wealth of knowledge where people find me and then they go, I can binge all of your content, rather than like little snappy Instagram videos that nobody really cares about, that might attract a bit more, like notice right now, but it's actually not necessarily building my brand in the long term. So, you can create that. Well, let's say you create 300 pieces of content in the next year. You don't have to, but let's say you did. Do you want to have 300 YouTube videos, or do you want to have 300, TikTok? Like, which one is going to be more effective? I think YouTube, but again, you gotta figure this out for yourself. But can you see what I mean? It's just this way of thinking. If we come out of short-termism, we're gonna actually just be way more successful in the long term.